I'm Jay Widener, and this is Reality Check. Hit like and subscribe and tell your friends. Let's grow the channel. We're back to reading the book, A Monument to the End of Time. The chapter today is the longest chapter in the book. It's 15 pages. I'm not going to read all 15 pages, so I've broken it into two parts. So we'll do like 6.5, 7 pages, and then 9 pages next week. I couldn't possibly lay this much on you in one sitting. It's just too much. All right. So this is section 3 of chapter 5, The Secret of the Knights of the Temple of Solomon, part 1. Our word crusade comes from the Spanish word cruzada, meaning marked with the cross. The Crusaders were indeed marked by the cross in more than just the design emblazoned on their tunics. They were inflamed by a new version of Christianity, one in which there was work to do. The kind of work the semi-barbarian kings of the West understood best, warfare. The First Crusade stands as the kind of human monument to belief in the end of the world. Sylvester and Otto III had tried to build a new unified world state from the fragments of the ancient world. They saw this state, which perhaps was meant to include the Fatimids as well, as a bulwark against the rising tide of the barbarian Asiatics. In Central Europe, these refugees appeared as Khazars and Jews. In Asia Minor, they were known as the Seljuk Turks. These migratory pressures threatened the Eastern Empire at Constantinople, as well as the Fatimid control of Palestine. The Western Empire, reviving under Otto III and Sylvester, created the Christian kingdoms of Eastern Europe, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary as a barrier to further invasions from the East. United, the three parts of the early medieval world, the two Romes and the Fatimids, could have resisted not just the pressure of the Turks, but of the later Mongol invasions. As it happened, however, the Seljuk Turks conquered Palestine in 1071 and threatened the stability of the entire world when they turned on Constantinople. After a disastrous defeat, the Eastern Empire made a humiliating peace and was left with very little of Asia Minor. The empire had been saved, but the way to Constantinople was open to the next wave of Turkish invaders. At this point, a mysterious figure breaks the surface of anonymity to begin his career as one of the principal movers and shakers of the First Crusade. In 1088, Peter the Hermit was an unknown monk belonging to one of the clerical or chronicling orders. Curiously, its name has not come down to us, but his appearance on the scene connections at the very highest level. That year, Peter the Hermit traveled from Jerusalem to deliver an unimpassioned plea from Simeon, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, to the newly elected Pope Urban II. This plea for aid from the West and its offer of a reconciliation between the churches would certainly not have been entrusted to a simple itinerant preacher. The Patriarch's letter caused years of intense discussion within the church, and he set the tone for Urban's papacy. In early 1095, Alexius I, the Eastern Emperor, sensing weakness in the current Seljuk infighting, sent an envoy to Pope Urban II and the Council of Piacenza, asking the military for aid to the West. Urban II was influenced by the opportunities these entreaties provided. Perhaps the old Sylvesterian scheme of a united world state could actually be achieved. It was a risk, but it just might be worth taking. Urban departed on a 6-month-long tour of northern Italy and southern France, collecting support. In August, from Le Puy in southern France, a church council was called for November at Clermont in Auvergne, not far from the small monastery at Arliac. Exactly what Urban had in mind and what he expected from the Clermont synod is unclear. He seems to have intended a military expedition, not unlike those that had already sanctioned in Muslim Spain. What he got was something entirely different. Urban II, born Odo of Châtillon-sur-Marne and a former prior of Cluny, was a man of broad views. an experienced organizer and skilled diplomat dedicated to his predecessors, Gregory VII's program of reforms. Unlike Gregory, whose fiery intensity seemed to leave no one untouched, Urban was supremely human, tall, handsome, socially at ease, and aristocratically distinguished. His overall goal was to reform the Western Church and to reunite it with the Eastern Church to create a truly Catholic or universal Christianity. Towards the end, Alexius I's request for aid looked like a major breakthrough. Urban was also influenced by the Peace of God movement and saw the call to arms against the, quote, accursed race, unquote, accursed race, wholly alienated from God, unquote, as he called the Turks in his speech to the crowd at Clermont, as a way to mitigate and channel the violence of the European nobility. On that crisp Tuesday morning, the 27th of November, 1095, thousands had gathered to hear the Pope's pronouncement. Itinerant monks and lay preachers had spread the word to the public session for months. When the day arrived, the crowd was far too great for the cathedral, so the meeting was held outdoors in a field near the eastern gate of the city. After the multitude had gathered, Urban II climbed up on a raised platform and addressed them. 4 contemporary chroniclers reported Urban's words. One of them, Robert the monk, claimed to have been there and heard the words as Urban spoke them. In his version, which we will paraphrase, he tells us that Urban began by calling out on the Franks, "O race of Franks, race beloved and chosen by God," Robert records, to come to the aid of their brethren in the East. Eastern Christendom has appealed for aid. The Turks were advancing into Christian territory, killing and desecrating as they came. Urban stressed the holiness of Jerusalem and the suffering of the pilgrims who journeyed there. Having painted a somber picture of conditions in the East, Urban made his appeal. Let Western Christendom march to the rescue. Let rich and poor march together and leave off killing each other for the greater good of killing the godless Turks. This was the work of God, Urban declared, and there would be absolution and remission of sins for those who died in this most holy of causes. There must be no delay. Let everyone be ready to march by the summer. God will be their guide. Urban, speaking in French to his fellow Frenchmen, rose to levels of eloquence that the Latin of the chroniclers could not convey. The enthusiasm, however, was beyond anything that even Urban had expected. Roars of Dieu le veut, or God wills it, swept through the crowd even before Urban finished his speech. At its conclusion, the Bishop of Lipoi fell to his knees, begging permission to join the expedition. Thousands followed his example. Hang on one second. The Pope was caught off guard. No plans had been made, certainly no arrangements for a mass movement such as erupted over the winter of 1095-96. While Urban reassembled his bishops to make the political arrangements, a group of wandering evangelists began to spread the word. Foremost among them was Peter the Hermit. The shadowy figure of Peter the Hermit, an enigma even to his contemporaries, haunts the story of the First Crusade. We have seen him in 1088 delivering a message from the Patriarch of Jerusalem to Pope Urban. Later, historians would doubt this story because of Peter's humble background and apparent insignificance. Yet there is something about the mysterious rabble-rousing monk that suggests powerful connections and important supporters. Piecing together his career gives us a glimpse of the hidden machinations behind the Crusades. Peter was born around the middle of the 11th century in Picardy, possibly near Amiens. Before becoming a monk, Peter was a minor noble who owed his fief to Eustace de Boulogne, Godefroy de Boulogne's future king of Jerusalem's father. Sometime after 1070, Peter joined a monastery in the Ardennes, where for a few years he served as a tutor to the young Godefroy. Sometime after 1080, he departed on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, where he apparently stayed until his mission to Rome in 1088. Nothing is known of his whereabouts until the winter of 1095, when he began to preach the new crusade at Bourges in the province of Berry. He apparently did not attend the church council at Clermont. Keeping in mind the work of Pope Sylvester II and his various chronicling orders, a pattern emerges from the shadows of Peter's story. Peter joined the group of monks in the Ardennes, those at Orval near Stenay, a site with rich Merovingian connections, whose patron was Godefroy's aunt and foster mother. This group of monks was part of a mysterious order of chroniclers from Calabria in northern Italy, who seemed mostly concerned with researching the bloodline of the Duke of Lorraine, Godefroy's family. If these monks were part of the chroniclers established in many different forms by Pope Sylvester, then it is easy to understand the many curious twists in Peter's career, such as his long sojourn in Jerusalem. He could have been transferred to the order's chapter there, the one established outside the city in the basilica given to them by the Mad Caliph al-Hakim. This makes sense in light of Peter's later diplomatic mission. Only a high-ranking member of a clerical order founded by the Pope himself would be fitting enough representative to deliver messages from the Patriarch of Jerusalem and the Eastern Church. Peter's silence between 1088 and 1095 might have been enforced by the dictates of his order. Only after the church council and its demonstration of mass approval was Peter the Hermit given permission to begin his own crusade. Before the year was out, Peter was in Berry preaching his own version of the Holy War, one in which the poor and the pious in Christ would sweep ahead of the nobles and conquer Jerusalem with only God's assistance. Goubert of Nogent, who knew him personally, gives us a glimpse of Peter's authority. Quote, everything he said or did, it seemed like something half divine, unquote. This unkempt, fiery-tempered monk who habitually went out about barefoot and in filthy rags was also a spellbinding orator capable of moving masses of people to extremes of emotion. They took the cross by the thousands and followed this Rasputin-like character down the long road to the east. In January, Peter left Berry and traveled through Orleans and Champagne, gathering crowds wherever he stopped. In Lorraine, he visited his old monastery near Orval and discussed the crusade with his old pupil, Godefroy de Bouillon. No record remains of their conversation, but something convinced Godefroy to join the crusade. By spring, as Peter collected his people's army in Cologne, Otto III's old capital, Godefroy took the cross at Amiens. Unlike the other nobles who participated in the First Crusade, Godefroy renounced his fiefs, sold his goods, and moved with his brothers to the Holy Land. Godefroy did not intend to return. Perhaps he already saw himself as the chief candidate for king of Jerusalem. Godefroy, of course, wasn't the only noble of ancient lineage taking the cross that summer. The group was officially under the leadership of the Bishop of Lepoy, Adhamar, as papal legate, and included Raymond of Toulouse, an old crusader from the Spanish Wars, Hugh of Vermandois, and Robert II of Flanders, along with Robert, the Duke of Normandy, and his brother-in-law, the hapless Stephen, Count of Blois. In September of 1096, word reached Urban that the Normans of southern Italy and Sicily were ready to take up the cross. These Normans, led by Bohemond and his nephew Tancred, brought the most experienced and capable soldiers in Europe to the crusading movement. Bohemond's father, Roger of Cuscard, had almost conquered Constantinople itself a few years earlier, and the Normans scented opportunity in the call to the east. In the long story of the First Crusade and its People's Crusade prologue is told in many places. The best of all these histories is still Sir Stephen Runciman's multi-volume work on the entire crusade. We recommend it to anyone wanting the complete story. For our purpose, we will concentrate on Peter the Hermit and his student, Godefroy de Bouillon. The People's Crusade, after a torturous journey across Central Europe, arrived at the gates of Constantinople in the spring of 1097 as a hungry and uncontrollable mob. The emperor shipped them over to the Asian side of the straits where they rashly attacked a Turkish stronghold and were annihilated. Peter the Hermit wisely stayed in Constantinople and therefore survived. He's still there and held in some honor when the next wave of crusaders arrived. As the crusading princes gathered in Constantinople, Peter joined them with the remnants of his army, perhaps because of his old association with Godfrey. By this point, the acknowledged leader of the crusade, Peter was respected as a visionary and counselor to the group. He marched on with Antioch, where he played a part in the drama of the Holy Spear. After Antioch, Peter joined with the Templars, or poor ones, in calling for a speedy advance on Jerusalem. After the fall of Jerusalem, Peter was one of the secret council, perhaps even its leader, who chose Godfrey as the king of Jerusalem. Godfrey declined the title, preferring instead that of defender of the Holy Sepulchre. But in 1100, his younger brother Baldwin accepted it readily. During Godfrey's reign, Peter the Hermit was held in such high regard that when the Crusaders pushed on to Ascalon, he was left in charge of Jerusalem. Before Godfrey left Jerusalem, almost his sole official act as king was to reconfirm the charter of an abbey on Mount Sion, south of the city and outside of its walls, in order its immediate fortification. Peter the Hermit survived until 1115 and divided his time between the court at Constantinople and the newly rebuilt abbey on Mount Sion, where he is believed to have died. The great French historian of the Crusades, René Grosset, commented that Godfrey's throne was founded on the rock of Sion, and that it indicated a royal tradition equal to that of the reigning dynasties of Europe. Grosset, however, does not explain his comment, leaving us to speculate on its meaning. Urban's plans of military aid for the Eastern Church was subverted by Peter the Hermit and his followers' insistence on a people's crusade. This popular impetus swept control of the expedition out of papal hands and into the hands of the military and political leaders on the spot. When Aldemar, the papal legate, died at Antioch, a council of such leaders took over. Peter was part of that council and was perhaps instrumental in choosing Godfrey king. The crusade changed from a papal expedition to something different, a popular movement with millennial expectations, and Peter the Hermit was at the heart of that change. If Peter was indeed a high-ranking member of one of the surviving chronicling orders started by Sylvester II, who were charged with researching the Merovingian bloodline, then his influence becomes readily understandable. Sylvester's chronicling orders had been working for almost a century to create a new kingdom of Jerusalem, and then suddenly the means were at hand. All that was needed was a candidate for king whose bloodline was such that all the kings of Europe could acknowledge him as overlord. Godfrey may have filled the bill because his chroniclers believed him to be a descendant of the lost line of Merovingian kings, and therefore a direct descendant of Jesus himself. That would, in fact, if proven, make him the rightful king of Jerusalem and perhaps the world. It would at least fulfill a great many apocalyptic expectations and could be seen as the first steps toward the kingdom of heaven on earth, so beloved by the Chileans. The rock of Sion could be Peter, Petra, or rock in Latin, the hermit of the order of Sion, to whom both Godfrey and Baldwin directly owed their throne. So much more so if Peter, as the official representative of Sion and the chroniclers, was their guarantor as legitimate descendants of Jesus. Mount Sion itself seemed the likeliest candidate for the location of the original order. Al-Hakim donated to Sylvester's chroniclers a Greek church somewhere outside the walls, but still close enough for access to the city. Mount Sion, which contains the ruins of a 4th century basilica rebuilt in the early 11th century, seems the most obvious choice. A group of monks were apparently still there in 1099 and may have played a part in the fall of the city. This rock of Sion and its connections in Europe could also be considered the foundation of the dynasty. But as we shall see, there could be, in fact, another rock of Sion on which the kingdom of Jerusalem was built. The authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail deserve credit for their discoveries concerning the role by the order or priory of Sion in the creation of the Templars. Just as they were right about the unusual and probable Jewish Christian origins of the Merovingians, they were correct as far as they went about the mysterious precursors to the Templars who occupied Mount Sion. While not going far enough back to uncover the pivotal role played by Pope Sylvester II, Holy Blood, Holy Grail's facts about the Order of Our Lady of Sion are both correct and suggestive. By the time the supposed Templars arrived on the scene in 1118 or 19, the Order of Sion was already a powerful group with close ties to the King of Jerusalem. These ties were based in all probability on the Order's knowledge of the dynasty's true heritage. Therefore, the secret at the heart of the Templars' sudden rise in the medieval world was due more to than just, as Holy Blood, Holy Grail suggests, a knowledge of Jesus's descendants. Once again, something more is involved. The missing piece is alchemy. The Merovingians, whether or not they were descended from Christ, were indeed practical alchemists and wizard kings. Sylvester II, the Hermetic Pope, was on the verge of recovering that secret when power politics overwhelmed him. The motivation for the First Crusade, deeply hidden behind the religious and political rationalizations, was actually the search for and recovery of the secret. A Merovingian king on the throne of Jerusalem was just the first step in the millennium's events. Next would come the rebuilding of the temple based on the Philosopher's Stone, the stone the builders rejected. This was the true mission of the Templars, and Holy Blood, Holy Grail is partly correct. The secret did involve the bloodline. Curiously, the authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail rarely mention alchemy, even though several supposed grand masters of Sion are prominent alchemists. Only once in the entire book does alchemy come to the forefront. In discussing the Templars and their mysterious head, even the authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail are forced to make alchemical allusions. Whatever the Templars were trying to accomplish, the secret of alchemy was a central and critical component of their plan. Okay, so that's the first half of section 3, and I'll read the second half next week. And it's just too much for one reading. But we can see that even though most people don't know who Peter the Hermit is, he's like Gandalf, sort of, in Lord of the Rings. He's manipulating the situation without anybody kind of noticing it. And he wears clothes, rags, and goes barefoot so that people underestimate him. But he's actually really smart and a fiery orator. There's a pretty good movie. It doesn't really depict any of these events, but it really gives you the feeling about this time period. And that's Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven. Very, very, very good movie. It came out, I think, in 2005. Wasn't a very big hit, but it was a fantastic movie. And I highly recommend it if you just want to get the feel of the time. Get the director's cut, though. Don't get the theatrical version. They cut out Ridley's edits, and they're really important in telling the story. You got a lot of good actors in it, Liam Neeson, and just a great film. Yeah, I highly recommend it. Anyway, that's it for my reading for the day. I'm Jay Widener, and we're watching Reality Check. Hit like and subscribe, and tell your friends, and we'll be back next week with part 2 of section 3. Thanks. We have all the facilities for these people for an extended trip, and they would build ostensibly as passenger ships. But it's almost as if JP knew that World War I was coming, and he was prepping, he was getting the ships ready so that they would be able to carry troops in some future war. So the Olympic was the first one built, and it was I think it came out in maybe late 1910, early 1911. And